Hi, and welcome to the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. I'm your host, Tegan Thompson. I'm a book lover, a chocoholic, and an INTJ living in a world filled with extroverts. I made this podcast to share my experiences and struggles as an introverted perfectionist, and to bring the inner workings of an introvert's mind to introverts and extroverts alike. So grab a cup of tea and get comfortable. It's time to unmute. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. This week we will be talking about the non-introverted qualities that get stereotyped to introverts. So there are many qualities often viewed as negative by society that are associated with introverts that aren't truly introverted qualities. And I believe it's important to be aware of these things that are negatively impacting the introverted community so that we can stop viewing introversion as a negative trait as a whole. And a lot of that negative viewpoint is coming from some of these traits that aren't actually introverted traits, but that get associated with introversion. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. And the first one is that being shy is equal to being introverted. Many people have the false perception that all introverts are shy and all shy people are introverts, and that they're kind of one and the same, interchangeable, when in reality they're not interchangeable. They are not the same thing. They do not mean the same thing. And, you know, an introvert, I have said many times, and I will say again, is someone who is often pretty reserved, needs alone time to kind of recharge and gain their energy, yet they still are confident and can be comfortable in social situations. Whereas shyness usually involves discomfort and or anxiety in social situations. Also, unlike introversion, which is kind of more of a personality trait, shyness can fade with time or with comfort. So I will give you an example of this. I am someone who is initially shy at first when I meet people. I don't feel as secure or as comfortable, and so I'm quiet, kind of reserved, kind of anxious and nervous in those social situations. But as I get more comfortable and I get to know someone, I lose my shyness and I become very vocal and more outgoing, and I love hanging out with the people. So it is something that can come and go and depends on who you are with. Whereas being an introvert, you're just an introvert. It's not something that changes very often. So kind of to sum up this idea, there's a quote by a neuroscientist who studies shyness that I really enjoyed and I wanted to share with you guys. And they said, "Shyness is a behavior. It's being fearful in a social situation, whereas introversion is a motivation. It's how much you want and need to be in those interactions." So, being shy, which is often viewed as a very negative trait in our society. If you're shy, it's like, you need to break out of your shell. You need to be more vocal. You need to learn how to be in social situations, blah, blah, blah. Is often associated with being an introvert when it's not always true. It can be true. You can be an introvert and you can be shy, but it's not always true, and they should not be associated with each other. Introversion does not mean shyness, and I think that's one of the biggest things for people to be aware of and to learn. And the second thing I have is that there is the misconception that introverts don't like being around people, and I'm sure you've heard this before. You may have heard that, introverts aren't people. They don't like hanging out. They don't want to be around people. They just don't like people. And this isn't true. While introverts do need their alone time and their space to recharge, needing your alone time and needing space to recharge is not the same thing as being antisocial or not wanting people's company or being socially anxious. Introverts, they tend to prefer smaller social circles with higher quality people and when I say higher quality, I don't mean that they're better people. I mean that they're people that they have stronger, more intimate relationships with, that they know on a deeper level and they kind of feel really safe with, rather than having a high quantity of people in their social circle, right? These tend to be just a large number of acquaintances, people that kind of just you surface level know, but beyond that, not too much. And so this is really a big thing for introverts, and it's really hurtful in the introverted community when people think, oh, well, they're introverted, they don't like people. That's not true. They like people. They're just selective about who they choose to share their energy with, because their energy is precious to them. It can run out quickly. It can take a lot of time to recharge, and that's their own time that they're using to do that. And it's mentally and physically draining. So they're just being conscious and aware of who they share that energy with. And that doesn't mean that they don't like people. That doesn't mean that they're antisocial. So I think that's a really big and important thing to remember. And the last thing I have is that introverts have more negative personalities. And this is false. And I'm going to go a little more in depth because negative personalities can be pretty vague. Since introverts enjoy and like and often prefer to be alone, they are often stereotyped as having more depressive or negative slanting traits like anxiety, or stuff like that, because they spend so much time alone, right? The biggest problem with this stereotype and this misconception is that it most likely is a trait that stems from the fact that extroverts tend to feel sad or depressed when they don't spend enough time around people. And so what extroverts are doing is taking what they feel and placing it onto introverts, which is not helpful, it's not beneficial, and it's not truthful. Introverts and extroverts are very different people when it comes to energy. And I've talked about this before. Extroverts get their energy from being around people. So when they're not around people, they're going to feel drained. When quite the opposite is true for introverts. When they're around people, they feel drained. And so they need that alone time to recharge. And they enjoy that alone time because they can maintain their energy. So it doesn't make sense to place something that an extrovert feels onto introverts because it doesn't apply in the same context, right? Two different ways of, expressing and using energy. And so it just doesn't work to take that one feeling from an extrovert and place it onto an introvert. And so I just think it's so important to be aware of that, this idea that introverts are maybe more sad or more depressed or stuff like that. It's like, because they spend so much time alone is, not truthful. And I understand that it's hard maybe for an extrovert to wrap their head around the idea that you can actually enjoy being alone, but introverts do. And so, having this false stereotype, this misconception, is very, very hurtful to the introverted community. It negatively impacts them because then, there's this huge, negative point of view placed on the introverted community, and it's placed on everyone who is an introvert. And so I think it's really essential, to be honest. It's important for people to be aware of these things that are misconceptions and stereotypes that aren't true, so that you can stop, perpetuating them in society, and maybe educate other people, so that people who are introverts and kids who grow up being introverted aren't consistently being told that their personality is a negative thing and that they shouldn't want to be that and that they should need to change, because that is detrimental, and can cause a lot of mental health issues for that individual, including things like struggling to self-identify with who you really are. So being aware, spreading awareness, and just constantly self-evaluating where your thoughts are is so important when it comes to a lot of things. Since we're talking about this, I will apply it to this. So, the next time maybe you're talking to someone and introversion comes up and you hear them start talking about, oh, well, they're just shy people, or I don't know, they don't like people. You are now more equipped to have a conversation about how those aren't true. And also, I just want to kind of push you to go and educate yourself on other areas where there are stereotypes. There's a lot of stereotypes that aren't true about certain communities, and whether those things may apply directly to you or people you care about, educating yourself so that you can, be equipped with the information when it's needed. When people say things that aren't true, you can now be equipped with the information to be like, hey, that's not true, and I know it's not true because of this. And that way that person can go forward and maybe recognize that, oh, what I've been learning is false, and I maybe need to do my own research, or I need to tell other people about this. And so that's how you spread awareness, and that's just so important. So always taking the time to research and educate yourself on it. So yeah, that's what I have to say today. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you learned anything new, please go share it with a friend. And as always, have a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next week on the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast.